Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning on this chilly Sunday morning, and welcome to St. Bart's in Midtown Manhattan. My name is Meredith Ward. I'm the Associate Rector for Pastoral Care here, and I'm with my colleague, the Reverend Dr. And this morning, it is our delight to welcome the Reverend Dr. Breyer. Chloe serves as Executive Director of the Interfaith Center of New York, and she is here this morning to tell us about the important work that the Interfaith Center is doing, and she's going to make a particular mention about the special work that the center is doing related to the migrant crisis. So we're all looking forward to hearing from you. Chloe, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Well, thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here. Thank you for your welcome here at St. Bart's. So I am just embracing the opportunity to be with all of you and explore a little bit about a theme that it sounds like you're all thinking about as well, and that is the theme of what does it mean to make a place at the table, which in our day and age is also something that is on the minds of the faith leaders that we work with around the city, and at a time that's fraught with polarization, we wonder how is it that different faith communities around the city can help transform hate into hope and hospitality, which is another way of saying the same thing. So I'm going to introduce you this morning a little bit to our work at the Interfaith Center and the mission that we've had now for many years to really overcome violence and prejudice through activating the power of New York City's grassroots religious and civic leaders. That is really what we have done since 1997, when we were founded by the former dean of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. To do that, though, and to give you a sense of what this means, I want to look at our context first. What is this, the religious diversity, that we have here in New York City? And I think we all know one of the extraordinary things about the city is its diversity. And that, of course, extends to religion and religious communities that make up the really vital part of who we are. So we've got a little bit of statistics here. You got to take them with a grain of salt, because remember, you can't ask on the census about religion because of the separation of church and state. So people try to figure it out. And again, these are estimated numbers. Of course, by far the largest religious tradition here in the city are the different sects and denominations of Christianity, followed by a large Jewish population compared to other parts of the country and other parts of the world. A growing number of Muslim and Hindus. I think actually about 10% of the New York City public schools are Muslim and Muslim families. So it's, again, and the ethnic diversity is extraordinary. This is one of the places in the world where you don't talk about the Muslim community of New York, you talk about the Muslim communities of New York, because of course you have folks from Bangladesh, you have Arab countries, you have everyone under the sun. African diaspora traditions are here among us a lot as well, and Sikhs, which are a very small group around the world, but there are quite a few people in the number here. And one of the things that we do at the Interfaith Center of New York is we're not just interested in what's the statistics, how are these communities engaging in the larger city? Because it's one thing to be diverse, it's another thing to interact with others in what's we know as the kind of challenge of vibrant civic life, right? We know that it often takes a lot of work to get diverse communities to work together. One way we measure this, not only the diversity, but the civic engagement, is we take out a copy of, I think the Department of Motor Vehicles or somebody has a list of alternate side parking exemptions, right? And you can look at that list and you can say, who are the most recent community members who are coming to our city, and how civically involved are they? Because of course, that list probably started with, President's Day and Christmas, and then there's perhaps one Jewish holiday, and now we got 2 Jewish holidays, 2 Eids, there are 2 Eids, not 1, 2, Diwali, and I think we're up to Lunar New Year as well. So these are ways that you can kind of, it's a very unique New York sort of thing. So to give you a visual sense of this diversity as well, I'm going to share with you right now, just for about 6 or 7 minutes, a video that the Interfaith Center did for the police department, actually, because we figured back, one of everybody, the 30,000 police officers in this city and the 20,000 civilians who work with them have a big impact on the way that faith communities, immigrant faith communities, can interact. And we thought it's super important that they get a kind of diversity training for the types of immigrant and religious groups they might encounter on the ground and have preconceptions about. So I'm going to show this video, part of it, to you, because it'll give you a sense also of what this landscape looks like, and also a little bit about how and what kind of educational work the Interfaith Center does. So bear with me. Oh, this is us. This is the presentation of the video to the 400 equity and inclusion officers that now are. I mean, the NYP's come a long way, actually, because there's one for every one of the precincts in the city right now that has this remit.
New York City has always been blessed by its vibrant religious diversity. The city's countless faith communities generally live together in peace, but like all New Yorkers, they rely on the New York City Police Department to guarantee their safety, liberty, and security. We spoke with local religious leaders about their beliefs and traditions and their experiences working with the NYPD. In this brief video, we cannot explore all of the religious practices you may encounter while on patrol. So we have focused in part on faith communities that may be less well known or misunderstood by other New Yorkers. We hope a richer understanding of the city's religious life will help you work effectively with the diverse New Yorkers you protect and serve.
Religious leaders play a very important role in police and community relations. We're called to be the bridge builders, the one that's sort of like the mediator between community and the police. We're called to create harmony wherever we are, even in the midst of the most intense situations out there.
New York is such a great city with many different communities that it's even more important today than it was ever before for everyone to know what kind of communities exist in New York, who the people are, what do they stand for, and their basic principles.
Every New Yorker has their own sense of personal style, but in some cases, you can learn a great deal about an individual's religious faith and identity by paying attention to their dress and physical appearance.
Like with any faith community, for Muslims, you might not always be able to tell that you're interacting with a Muslim simply by looking at them. Muslims in New York are Arab, they're African immigrants, they're African American, they're Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Albanian, Turkish. Extremely diverse, look diverse, diverse skin colors, diverse ways of dressing.
Islam is a faith tradition and a way of life, rooted in the teaching of the Quran and the moral example of the Prophet Muhammad. The tradition was first brought to New York by enslaved African Muslims in the 17th century. Today, following the growth of the African American Muslim community, as well as immigration from throughout the Muslim world, some 600 to 800,000 Muslim New Yorkers worship at nearly 300 mosques throughout the city.
There's a very important, aspect in Islam. As the man, he shows his obedience to Almighty God by growing a beard.
For women in particular, they will wear loose garments, long sleeve, long skirts, long pants. And they may also choose to cover their hair wearing a hijab. They may also choose to cover their face wearing a niqab. Women are asked to cover themselves with modest dress when they're interacting with males who are not their relatives.
Buddhism is an ethical and spiritual tradition that has no single definition of religious identity or membership. Some 150 to 200,000 New Yorkers, mostly but not entirely in the city's rapidly growing Asian communities, would describe themselves as Buddhists and participate in temple life. Many more, however, are guided or inspired by Buddhist thought and practice.
For me, a little bit research is very important because in a Buddhist tradition also there are many different countries in Asia and they speak all different languages. Chinese, but even like a Mandarin, Cantonese different. Korean language is different, Japanese language is different, and Tibetan language is different, Sri Lankans, everybody sort of speak different languages. There are many different Buddhist traditions we have, but one of the common core is this emphasis of awareness or so-called enlightenment.
Sikhism is a religious tradition rooted in the teachings of Guru Nanak and his successors, who built an independent faith community in the Punjab region of South Asia beginning in the 15th century. There are approximately 50,000 Sikhs in New York City, including a large population in Richmond Hill, Queens. The vast majority are Punjabi immigrants and their families.
So one of the things that is important to know about Sikhism is that it's the 5th largest religion in the world. There are 23 million people worldwide. We've been in the United States for over 100 years, so we are in every facet of society.
In most situations, when you see an individual wearing a turban, and I would argue in 99% of those situations, when you see someone wearing a turban, that person is a Sikh.
So this is the turban unfolded. So it is about 15 feet long and about 2 feet wide. An initiated Sikh wears the 5 articles of faith. We call them the 5 Ks. The Kesh, which is unshorn hair. Ganga, which is a wooden comb. Kada, which is the steel bangle. Kirpan, which is a mini sword, which is worn to think about defending people who cannot defend themselves or always doing the right thing. And then Kachera, which is the undergarment, and it represents self-discipline.
So going into a little bit more details about the Kirpan, because people always have questions about the Kirpan, and I'm sure the NYPD does as well. The Kirpan is an article of faith, similar to a small knife. It is generally worn in a crossbody strap called the Gatra. It's very sturdy, it's very secure.
New York has been a center of Jewish life since the 19th century, and its Jewish population now stands at nearly 1.1 million. The city's diverse Jewish communities include a broad spectrum of religious and secular identity and observance. This video will focus, however, on the rapidly growing Orthodox and Hasidic communities of Brooklyn.
The symbols of Jews and what a religious observant Jew carries or wears is very, very unique, because you can have an observant Jew not even carrying a yarmulke, but he's still an observant Jew. You can have the same observant Jew carry a host of different items. It's a lot according to tradition, what your grandfather used to wear hundreds of years ago. So you have different prayer shawls and different yarmulkes, your curls or payas. It's a sign that you don't forget you're observant Jew, a son of God. It's a sign that you are living your life for God and doing God's work.
Wait. Sorry. So this gives you a flavor, I think, of the city that we live in, the religious diversity that we are part of. And I think you'll understand from having seen that, what is it that draws us to work with migrants too? Because so much of the diversity, religious diversity of New York is linked with immigrant communities. But before I go to that, I want to back up just for a minute, because we do have a rather Episcopal background that I want to share with you in terms terms of our organization. And so just backing up before we go forward, I want to share with you a little bit. We were founded by the very Reverend James Parks Morton, who was actually Dean of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine for 25 years, and really was doing interfaith work before it was sort of seemed to be a kind of normal thing. And, bless him, we wouldn't be here, obviously, without him and his pioneering work that included work right here at St. Bart's, because you'll notice in this picture, this was taken after he left the cathedral, but St. Bart's was very important to him as he was starting the Interfaith Center, and I think this was back in possibly right before 9/11, actually, because of the annual service that was here celebrating the opening of the General Assembly. And you'll see Kofi Annan, the Secretary General, and so many diverse religious leaders that came to St. Bart's as a way to celebrate the opening of the General Assembly for many years going forward. So I thought you might find that interesting, and that also, after 9/11, as we all were impacted by that, so too was the Interfaith Center, and I think we probably switched directions a little bit at the time to really focus on a kind of more of a community organizing model of interfaith work, given what the needs of the times were. And you will remember the backlash, I think, after 9/11 against the Muslim communities, the hate speech that is kind of coming back now, but at that point it was really focused on, for example, the proposal to build a mosque at Ground Zero. We had a whole slew of subway ads that we had to try to respond to, because the answer, as we know, to hate speech is often more speech rather than censorship. So that was something that the Interfaith Center was very engaged with, as we were at the time. Again, you may remember, if you were here, when this proposal for a mosque at Ground Zero, which was causing a lot of, really just a lot of hot air, actually, but we had real life consequences. The mayor at the time, Bloomberg, went all the way out to he went out to Battery Park to have a press conference as a man who, was proud of his Jewish heritage, to announce how important it was to protect the religious liberty of Muslims. And so we kind of stood behind him on that and gathered religious leaders and worked to get dialogues all over the city in the run-up to the 10th anniversary of 9/11. So what are our programs? You've seen some of them. There's education we do for teachers. We do it for New York police officers and also law students. We have a bunch of programs. The Rabbi Marshall Meyer Retreat is often on a social justice a theme that we get experts at and invite religious leaders to have the best understanding of how do you confront homelessness, or how do you confront health issues, and this is one venue that we do at the time. A Interfaith Civic Leadership Academy, which is a way to invite upcoming religious leaders from super diverse backgrounds to learn about how the city of New York works and to how to be civically engaged on behalf of their communities. So that's something else that is a big, and here they are being civically engaged at the mayor's Interfaith Breakfast. And likewise with our own bishop, Dici, down for Christian Harmony Week at this extraordinary new, down at Ground Zero, it's the Greek Orthodox Church has built this exceptionally beautiful. I don't know if you all have been there. It's really worth a field trip. Oh my gosh. The iconography is extraordinary, and it's just a gift to the city. So that is again, we try to get our fellows out and about, mostly so we can go too. And then obviously anti-gun violence work as it manifests here in New York City. That we try to maintain the UN connection, as you can see here, but the meat of the work is in our own neighborhoods. Perlman Performing Arts Center, we're an anchor partner for as well. That's a little off topic for it, but it's a great place too. Again, I want to make sure you get down there. So we try to bring awareness through the media and through our social media. And then that brings us to really what a lot of the meat of our work is now, given the circumstances that we all find ourselves in. How is it that we can bring our expertise in interfaith, in diversity, to to this challenge of the enormously, this extraordinary and really just huge wave of people that have come in a different way than they've ever come to New York before. Because someone was reminding me, traditionally, people, when communities came to New York, it was in, somebody would come, they would get established, then they'd bring other people from the family in. So there was a sort of, now just the scale of what's coming, of people coming to New York from, being sent up from Texas is really challenging all of us. So these are just some examples of ways that we at the Interfaith Center are trying to respond through this. Obviously, as you know, most people have come to arrive via bus to Port Authority, though a lot of others are coming by plane, and that sort of the Port Authority thing is taking a hiatus for the moment as people are going to New Jersey. But we thought, okay, let's develop a covenant, something where we can, as church or house of worship, can do something and also hold government accountable and the private sector, because this is such a large issue for us, such a crisis and opportunity. We cannot do it alone. So that's what the covenant is, and I encourage you to sign it if you're interested. By those little things on your table will take you to a link tree, and you can check that out. We also have a network, and St. Bart's, you guys have sometimes participated in this. It's a kind of bi-monthly call where houses of worship all over the city, all of them are doing something really interesting and really helpful, whether it's like a day drop-in center or a legal clinic that they're doing, or just providing winter clothing, you name it. This photos of St. Paul's and St. Andrews up on the Upper West Side, but people are doing this kind of work all over the city, and when they get together, they help themselves problem solve. So that is really amazing. And just one example that I want to use of just like an over-the-top kind of situation. A lot of the people coming are from Senegal and Mauritania. Like, you don't hear about that a lot in the news. Many are West African and Muslim. And so there's one particular mosque in the Bronx. You can go there at any given day. There are usually 60 to 120 people sleeping in that mosque. And this is a mosque that's probably about this, it's a brownstone, basically. So that has its own problems, but it also is a challenge to all of us, I think, where how is it that people with so little can kind of give so much? And this is a picture of a legal clinic that we worked with New York Law School to kind of bring law students up to see if people could qualify either for TPS or work papers and asylum applications. So that is keeping us busy. Likewise, the opportunity for interfaith partnerships is amazing. And I've talked about this before, but you have on the left-hand side, the Church of the Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ has an incredible storehouse in a warehouse in New Jersey. They call it, it's like the Bishop's Warehouse or something, because they get a lot of goods from Utah. They're trucked over, to the different parts of the church. And so they asked us, like, what can we do? How can we help? And, so we set up a sort of, chain link where we got these dry goods that then went to a Buddhist temple in the Bronx who had an industrial kitchen, and then those goods were then turned into meals and enjoyed at the mosque that I mentioned. Who is it that makes this happen? Well, it's just a group of New Yorkers. You've got up here in the upper left side, Detective Mohammed Amen, who's been working with the NYPD and our liaison there forever and knows everything that's going on all the time. Then you have next to him the imam of the mosque that I just mentioned. Then on the lower part, you have the back of the Venerable, who is at the Temple of Enlightenment that cooked all this food. And then you have over in the right, you have Amaha, who is, Sylvie's son, a board member, that she's down at the Port Authority all the time. So she really kind of keeps us abreast of what's happening. Anyway, so it's not rocket science. It just takes committed and diverse individuals offering what they have. I'm going to talk more about this particular picture at the service today. But basically, I'm going to close here and take any questions that you all might have. The other opportunity that we've been working with New York Interfaith, New York NIDUS, it's called, is a sort of partnership with the city on these, like a shelter program, which is a much more complicated endeavor, but one that certainly saves the city money and is generally better for migrants who don't have to be in congregate settings and can be in smaller spaces. So with that, I would love to address any questions, or it's a lot of information to take in, and I encourage you to explore online if you have any questions, but I'd be glad to answer anything.
Thank you, Chloe, so much. That is, wow, that is kind of amazing, the work that you're doing. We definitely have time for questions, so if you are here with us in the room, Natalie Johnson, I think, has question cards, and just raise your hand and she will pass a card to you to write your question down and bring it up here. If you're joining us online, you can put your questions in the chat or the comments, or you can email me at mward@stbarts.org. So while we're waiting for those questions to come in, I know Zach has questions as well, but one of the things I'm wondering about, and maybe a lot of us are, is there's sort of the elephant in the room of the situation in the Middle East. And I'm wondering how has that situation in Israel-Palestine how is that affecting your work right now?
I mean, I'll tell you in a very anti-intuitive way, because as soon as that happened, I remember people like, okay, this is your area. Let's hear what is the Interfaith Center going to do regarding religious conflict, and because of the religious diversity on our staff, which is something we have always prided ourselves on. Like, we are going to make sure that we are at every level of our organization, constituency, staff, and board. We're going to walk our talk, and this most of the time is a huge advantage, and it gives us, real credibility. I would say, with the exception of when war in the Middle East happens, because it was basically all we have been able to do internally to kind of keep ourselves focused on the mission. And so it meant turning down and not being public and not doing really any of the work that I would have thought, based on our mission, we would be involved with. So, we have I think we've agreed to sort of return to basics in some ways, which is to focus very locally. But as soon as you do that, you're inviting a kind of the question of like, how can you ignore what is really, impacting every part of the world and every part of our city? So I would say it's been the most difficult time I think I have really had. And we've had some difficult times because this has happened before. So there's nothing quite like this conflict, as we all know. Yeah.
It's actually really fascinating to hear that you have this community, this built-in community, and you've decided just to keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Zach?
Well, thanks, Chloe. This has been so inspiring already. I know folks are wondering about some of the nuts and bolts about how we as St. Bart's and as individuals might engage in helping out with the migrant crisis, both at the level of direct action and then political advocacy. So I'd like to ask about that, before jumping into the nuts and bolts, I think sometimes we group asylum seekers and refugees and migrants writ large all into one category,
right?
But they're not necessarily the same.
Right.
Help us understand that.
Yes. So, and in fact, I wish my colleague Brennan Brink had actually done a whole handout of that. So, an asylum seeker is a specific designation of someone who has come to, a port of entry and said to a U.S. official, I am afraid to return to my country, because of a form of, it's really got to be a political persecution. I mean, sometimes that designation shifts a bit, but that's really what it is. And then the border official has said, okay, you have a court date to actually go in front of an immigration judge and plead your case. Now, as it's happening now, those court dates go into 2031, okay? 2031. So that's one thing, and many of the people who are currently coming to New York are eligible for asylum, particularly those, not all of them, but many from Venezuela, because there's a pretty clear case for political persecution. Most of the folks from Senegal and elsewhere are environmental refugees because of the, desertification, all the things that make it absolutely impossible to overfishing. Fishing in Senegal was like a huge thing. You got trawlers that go out of their space and just scoop up all the fish. So it's like there's this whole, if you had to, and so migrants is a category that's supposed to capture both people coming and applying for this asylum thing and people who are coming for other reasons, who are literally moving from one space to another in search of survival often. It's not just a better life, it's about survival. So I think that's one important designation. What have I forgotten? Refugees. So refugees is, that's a serious, like, as the government in our government puts a cap on the number of people that will be accepted as refugees, that designation, which usually happens in a third place outside the country, if someone agrees to have refugee status, then they come to this country, and there's the whole resettlement program that has been up for a while. Trump tried to totally gut it, but their agencies, Episcopal Migration is among them, migration ministries, Lutheran migration, like HIAS, they actually, they're towns and all over the country, and people come and then they get a certain amount of assistance. So that's the most well-supported way of coming to the United States of those three, I guess. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. And how might the needs of asylum seekers particularly differ from other refugees? And then again, how can we be involved?
Well, right now there are, as the covenant says, the basic things are, and there's some that only the city can do. For example, making it easier for people and the federal government, but the city actually could do this if they wanted to, had enough willpower, would be to make it easier for people to get work. One of the things, whether you are a refugee, whether you are asylum seeker, any kind of migrant, the thing I have noticed most palpably is people are dying to work. You can't stop people from working. You go anywhere around the city where you see a huge collection of bikes, usually that's indication that there are people who are here, New Yorkers, and these are the bikes that somehow they've scrounged $800 for, and they're doing delivery work. And that they could have arrived yesterday. So the part, and if you have lawyers in your congregation, this is a skill that's worth its weight in gold at this point, because it's one thing for people to say, okay, Venezuelans now have TPS or are eligible for TPS. It's another thing to fill out the form that actually gets you TPS. It's hours of work.
Can you explain what TPS is?
Sorry, temporary protected status. It's another way to get work authorization besides applying for asylum. So you can get work authorization through, if the country that you're coming from is designated temporary protected status. So Venezuelans, yes. But here's where the lawyers come in really helpful, is it's not that we're asking lawyers to themselves go out and fill out, the TPS forms. It's that they can train other people to do that. So you don't have to be, it really helps that you have to be well trained and know how these forms work, and you just can't have any volunteer doing it. But lawyers can actually train, particularly if they have any background in immigration law, other people to do it. And that is one really critical thing. The other is English language, because it's so weird, like how you just haven't heard that much about English ESL, because everybody, people have to learn English, and not everybody has it. So English language, food, and clothing. And those two things, I feel like, are the easiest things that the churches and houses of worship probably migrate to, because we're kind of used to doing that. I bet, though, what I would do is do people sit down at your soup kitchen?
At Crossroads, they formerly did before COVID. Right now, we're serving 4 times as many people as we did in 2019, which has limited our capacity to offer the sit-down service, unfortunately.
Right. So I bet, if there's some way that people could interact with, with people who are coming, find out like who those 400 are, because I bet a lot of them are here either seeking asylum or potentially could have TPS if they knew that they were eligible for it. I bet you already have people here, is my guess. Is that?
Absolutely, and I'm looking at a few members of the St. Ives Guild right now. St. Ives Guild is our group of lawyers in the congregation, and who knows, there may be a project in your future. And actually the people who are doing this, the training of the people who've done it really well are Congregation Bet Simcha Torah, which is downtown. They have had a long-time legal clinic for the LGBTQ Russians, rather specialized. But LGBTQ asylum seeker Russians, but there are a lot of them, and they are doing trainings for other houses of worship that want to set up their own clinics, which is kind of amazing. So that's something that is, and they're on our bi-monthly call too.
So switching gears just a little bit, there's a question from someone in the audience about Christian nationalism and how that is impacting the way we welcome people. Does the center have anything to do with addressing the rise of Christian nationalism or counteracting that message, or is it just in the work that you do?
That is such a good question, and again, one of the reasons that we have such a broad set of activities that we do is because we do somewhat limit ourselves geographically. Mm-hmm. So, were there any Christian nationalists 2 months ago screaming at us on Staten Island for standing up for the refugees at St. John's Villa? Probably. Yeah, probably there are quite a few, actually, or if they didn't self-identify as that, they would have gone to websites and sources of media that were probably informed by that. But I feel like that is an intellectual, that's like a whole different realm of battle, as it were, that we unfortunately only see sort of the products of in the 5 boroughs. And so, it's a great question. I'm not sure we do that much beyond just trying to notice where it comes from and support those voices that are not Christian nationalist.
It was fun to hear you mention the LGBTQ plus Russians.
Yeah.
So
asylum seekers.
Asylum seekers,
LGBT,
yes. And you talked earlier about climate refugees.
Yeah.
So we're hearing intersectionality come into this conversation. Someone in the audience asks, how does the interfaith navigate possible tension among individuals whose religious views differ around things like women clergy and LGBTQ issues and so forth?
Yeah, that's, that when we first, some of our real founding principles of how do we kind of distinguish ourselves in this rather a space that's become very busy, the interfaith work, as it were, interfaith dialogue. We really wanted to focus on, and did from quite the early days, the religious diversity within traditions. So one of the things about the Rabbi Marshall Meyer retreat is that you kind of get some of these tensions surfacing, for example, around domestic violence. I remember that we had a very tense and animated discussion at one of the retreat about that. And obviously it was like about the role of women and different faith traditions that were one way or another. And it required a very skillful facilitation. But I think we are not afraid to kind of go there, and also to accentuate the fact that you can feel very differently and passionately. And the Middle East is like, you can't get more than that, but about different things and still work together. I mean, the current situation has tested this premise, but I think it still holds.
Yeah, it strikes me that sometimes it's easier for us to talk to our friends at Central Synagogue than perhaps a conservative evangelical Christian congregation, yes, and so sure, that kind of intra-faith work comes into play.
Yeah.
So here's a question from an online viewer who's wondering, as a Christian leader yourself of an interfaith organization, is it difficult for you to decenter Christianity in interfaith conversations?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that, because I really do view this work as part of as a ministry. And what part of the Christian message, what part of the good news, helps me get up and go to work in the morning, because I do see it as that, and recognize that my colleagues don't. They might see it as part of an extension of their faith beliefs, or no faith at all. One person has a background in anthropology, and is very quick to say, I'm here for anthropological reasons, or not. He doesn't say that, but that's, so for me, I think, I do believe that. Actually, Jim Wallace from Sojourners is very helpful in terms of of kind of saying we all have to translate, and this is really from King, we translate our primary faith claims, the things that we say from the pulpit, or that we act in, we have a set of language and ideas that define those beliefs, deeply held beliefs. And then I have the exercise of translating them into the public square, where they are just one of many different deeply held faith claims. And I have to make the case out there that these claims are true, because I have to convince everybody else, because we live in a democracy. So I do, and I think that Martin Luther King also was very cognizant of that, in the sense that he talked in a pulpit one way, and then when he got to the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, his analogies were about, a bounced check, or, they were sort of secular images that he knew would move people from non-Christian backgrounds. So I think that answers the question.
One of the things I so have appreciated observing your work is the way in which the center is not afraid to take leadership, but then also to share the mic. And I think about a few months ago when you were here together with our Bishop Matt Hyde, and we had this beautiful moment of multi-faith, interfaith leaders coming together in the chapel of St. Bart's, again, which was so poetic, because there above the altar are the three magi, who, of course, in no way converted to Judaism or Christianity before offering their gifts to the Christ child. And so here we were having this conversation, really powerful and challenging conversation around the migrant crisis in the shadow of the three magi coming from the east to offer their gifts. And then we went out on the steps, and Bishop Matt spoke, and you spoke, and various interfaith leaders from across the city spoke out against the mayor's right to shelter ban.
Where are you all tomorrow at noon, by the way? Sorry.
Well, I was wondering if you could give us an update on the right to shelter thing.
Yeah, so tomorrow at I'm going to say noon, there is the speaker, because unfortunately, we've begun to see very vulnerable people on the street because the 60-day limit for families, 30-day for single people, has, the deadlines have come. And so it's meant, there's been an enormous fight around families because kids have just gotten into school and you can't move them when that happens. And they say they're not moving people, but it's like what's actually happening, you don't know. So this is not, it's not sustainable. I mean, the idea that they go to this reticketing place at St. Bridget's, but the lines are so long, you get to like 2 in the morning and people are still out on the street, and then they're like, well, let's start a waiting center. A waiting center is defined by a place that has chairs and tables, no beds. And part of you is like, they are trying to make this as miserable as possible in order to get people to leave. So, tomorrow is, but on the other hand, the city is partnering with NIDIS and us on trying to get faith leaders to provide more shelter. So it's a very kind of, it's a confusing situation. The point is, outside Metro Baptist tomorrow, the speaker, Adrian Adams, who's been a real stalwart on this, on the migration issue, is having leading a, what are they calling, a speak out about fighting the 60-day and the 30-day rule. And so everybody's invited outside of Metro Hope Baptist Church on 40th Street. Whoa.
All right, so we know where to be tomorrow. We are, I think, just about out of time. Just one last question that came in from someone in the room, which is a question I had too. If people want to get involved with the Interfaith Center, or how do they do that? Are there volunteer opportunities at the center?
So that's such a good question. On your table is a little sort of thing that is basically this, which I think the best way is to sign up for our monthly newsletter, because not only does that have what we're doing, and the volunteer opportunities kind of come up, and we're not very regular about what volunteers can do, but also other interfaith things around the city. So it's a really good, I think it's the best way actually to and then you can show up for what you're interested in or not. And if you have any college age kids or grandkids that are looking for internships and are interested in religious diversity, that's another way to plug in. So.
Wonderful, excellent. Chloe, thank you so much. This has been amazing. And thank you all for joining us this morning. We will be headed right over to the 11 o'clock worship service, which will be right next door and on the live stream, and we'll see you back here next week. Thank you so much.